Hello everyone. I'm at the ocean today, but I'm blurring out the people in the background so that, I don't get anyone. But I brought Leia and I thought I'd come here today. Stay, Leia. Here, I'll show you the ocean. There you go. All right, so we're missing the waves, but we're gonna get the story. We're reading George MacDonald today, this book. It's from the 1800s and, hold on, I have my mic on. It'll just transform your life if you let it. He's basically, George MacDonald was C.S. Lewis's spiritual mentor, and the way he describes all of these things in this story helps you navigate your own life. It takes you through the ups and downs of your own psychology and all of your trying to understand and figure out what is the true path, what is the narrow path. I don't always say that, I just start reading, but if you want to know, that's why our souls are drawn to stories so rich like these. C.S. Lewis said he never met another author more closely knit to the Spirit of Christ or the Holy Spirit. I can't remember exactly. It's probably in the description. Come here, I'll put you on my lap. All right, so let's just start. Because anyway, it's like to get here and all this stuff, you have no idea. All right, I'm going to move my mic over to this side because I have a tendency to look over at you all. Sorry if it's scratching. There we go. Okay. Hopefully it makes it louder than the other videos. The other videos are just fine anyway. All right. It says tracking lock. Okay, I don't know what that means, but we can hear the ocean. A helicopter's coming right now, but at least we hear the ocean and we see the blue in the blue sky. I'll zoom in on the ocean when I can when there's no people. Or at least, whatever, it just blurs it. All right, let's start. And just trust that you're here at this chapter for a reason. If you haven't gotten the other ones, you can just listen now and go back or do whatever. All right. Chapter XLV. So that is I can't remember what that is. I remembered last time. Chapter... You subtract. Anyway, I forgot my Roman numerals. My head is in a different space right now. I know it's... Anyway. Shoals ahead. Okay, so it had to come to be the custom that Gibbie should go to Donald every Friday afternoon. It had come to be the custom. So this book is about Sir Gibbie. If you're on the playlist, then you're just listening to it already, so I won't explain it. I'll just say briefly, Sir Gibbie is this young man who is mute. He can't speak. And he just inherited all this money, but he was an orphan in the beginning of the book. And Donald's parents took him in when he had nothing except for anyway, you'll see. He had everything already within him in a way. But anyway. It had come to be the custom that Gibbie should go to Donald every Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock and remain with him till the same time on Saturday, which was a holiday with both. One Friday, just after he was gone, the temptation seized Mrs. Sclater to follow him and, paying the lads an unexpected visit, see what they were about. It was a bright cold afternoon, and in fur, tippet, and muff, amidst the snow that lay everywhere on the roofs and window-sills and pavements, and the wind that blew cold as it blows. In few places besides, she looked, with her bright color and shining eyes, like life itself laughing at death. But not many of those she met carried the like victory in their countenances, for the cold was bitter. As she approached to the Whitty Hill, she reflected that she had followed Gibbie so quickly and walked so fast that the boys could hardly have had time to settle to anything, and resolved therefore to make a little round and spend a few more minutes upon the way. But as through a neighbouring street she was again approaching the Whitty Hill, she caught sight of something which, as she was passing a certain shop, that of a baker known to her as one of her husband's parishioners, made her stop and look in through the glass, which formed the upper half of the door. There she saw Gibbie seated on the counter, dangling his legs, eating a penny loaf, and looking as comfortable as possible. "So soon after luncheon, too," said Mrs. Sclater to herself with indignation, because he was staying at their house for right now. Reading through the spectacles of her anger, a reflection of her on her own housekeeping, right? This is what we do when we're in egotism. We take it all personally. It's not personal. You'll see. But a second look revealed, as she had dreaded, far weightier cause for displeasure. A very pretty girl stood behind the counter, with whose company Gibbie was evidently much pleased. She was fair of hue, with eyes of grey and green, and red lips, whose smile showed teeth whiter than the whitest of flour. At the moment she was laughing merrily and talking gaily to Gibbie. Clearly they were on the best of terms, and the boy's bright countenance, laughter, and eager motions were making full response to the girl's words. Gibbie had been in the shop 2 or 3 times before, but this was the first time he had seen his old friend Mysie of the amethyst earring. That's at the beginning, he found an amethyst earring. Anyway, and now one of them had reminded the other of that episode in which their histories had run together. From that, Mysie had gone on to the other reminiscences of her childhood in which wee Gibbie bore a part, and he had, as well as he could, replied with others of his in which she was concerned. Mysie was a simple, well-behaved girl, and the entrance of neither father nor mother would have made the least difference in her behaviour to Sir Gilbert, though doubtless she was more pleased to have a chat with him than with her father's apprentice, who could speak indeed, but looked dull as the dough he worked in, because she's working at the bakery, right? Her father owns a bakery. Whereas Gibbie, although dumb, was radiant. Wow. Dumb meaning he just can't speak. Maybe I'll just get this background for a little bit. Oh, it's noon, I forgot. My friend, who's a photographer, said don't ever film at noon because there's just no sun that can shine on you or the whatever. All right, so we'll just keep it like this. I don't know all these things. Anyway. But the faces of people talking often look more meaningful to one outside the talk circle than they really are, and Mrs. Sclater, gazing through the glass, found, she imagined, large justification of displeasure. She opened the door sharply and stepped in. Gibbie jumped from his seat on the counter and, with a smile of playful roguery, offered it to her. A vivid blush overspread Mysie's fair countenance. "I thought you had gone to see Donald," said Mrs. Sclater, in the tone of one deceived, and took no notice of the girl. Gibbie gave her to understand that Donald would arrive presently, and they were then going to the point of the pier, that Donald might learn what the sea was like in a northeaster, in a storm. Just like we're at the sea, that's so awesome. They don't often bring up the sea where they were before. It wasn't in it in the beginning of the story. Just a little bit. "But why did you make your appointment here?" asked the lady. "Because Mysie and I are old friends," answered the boy on his fingers, like he can do sign language now. Sir Gilbert tells me you are old friends," she said. Thereupon Mysie told her the story of the earring, which had introduced their present conversation, and added several other little recollections, in one of which she was drawn into a description, half pathetic, half humorous, of the forlorn appearance of wee Gibbie as he ran about in his truncated trousers. Mrs. Sclater was more annoyed, however, than interested. For in view of the young baronet's future, she would have had all such things forgotten. But Gibbie was full of delight in the vivid recollections thus brought him of some of the less painful portions of his past, and appreciated every graphic word that fell from the girl's pretty lips. So, yeah, his mother had died when he was very young, doesn't even remember her, soon after his birth, I think. And then his father died of alcoholism when he was about maybe 12 or something. And he went out into Doorside, just because his father had said up Doorside, this phrase before he died of drinking too much whiskey. His father, Leia, sit, come on. She sees another dog. Anyway, come here, Leia. You want to sit on my lap? All right. Mrs. Sclater took good care not to leave until Donald came. Then the boys, having asked her if she would not go with them, which invitation she declined with smiling thanks, took their departure and went to pay their visit to the German Ocean, leaving her with Mysie, which they certainly would not have done could they have foreseen how the well-meaning lady, 9/10 of mischiefs in the world are well meant, would hurt the feelings of the gentle conditioned girl. For a long time after, as often as Gibbie entered the shop, Mysie left it, and her mother came, a result altogether as Mrs. Sclater would have had it, but hardly anybody was ever in less danger of falling in love than Gibbie, and the thing would not have been worth recording but for the new direction it caused in Mrs. Sclater's thoughts. Measures, she judged, must be taken. Gladly as she would have centered Gibbie's boyish affections in herself, she was too conscientious and experienced not to regard the danger of any special effort in that direction, and began therefore to cast about in her mind what could be done to protect him from one at least of the natural consequences of his early familiarity with things unseemly, exposure, namely, to the risk of forming low alliances. That's how they talked back then. She's supposed to teach him manners, but he doesn't care anything of persons like that. He knows better that all people are equal in the eyes of God, In the sense of our souls is something, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. Anyway, I'll just let the story keep speaking for itself. Hopefully the book is blocking some of the wind. The more eminent that it was much too late to attempt any restriction of his liberty, so as to keep him from roaming the city at his pleasure. Recalling what her husband had told her of the odd meeting between the boy and a young lady at Miss Kimball's school, some relation, she thought he had said, also the desire to see her again, which Gibbie on more than one occasion had shown, she thought whether she could turn the acquaintance to account. She did not much like Miss Kimball, chiefly because of her affectations. She's like, oh, yes, I'm so rich. Anyway, stuff like that. Affectations. So Gibbie, when he was a little boy, would just run all of the streets of of downtown of whatever city this is, and help people find stuff that was missing, and go find an oven to sit by to get warm when he was living there by himself for a while after his father died, before he went out into the countryside. Anyway, everybody knew him, and he knows the whole city. Chiefly because of her affectations, which, by the way, were caricatures of her own. Ha ha ha! That's so funny. So they were caricatures of her own affectations, of Mrs. Sclater's. and so she didn't like it in someone else. But she knew her very well, and there was no reason why she should not ask her to come and spend the evening and bring 2 or 3 of the elder girls with her. A little familiarity with the looks, manners, and dress of refined girls of his own age would be the best antidote to his taste for low society, from that of bakers' daughters downwards. Leia. Shh. Come on. They're our friends. Sit. Shh. It's okay. It was there's a dog over there. It was Mrs. Sclater's doing that Gibbie had not again spoken to Ginevra. Shh, 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 shh. Now was, abashed at the thought of the grenadier of her army of doves, she would have gone the very next day after meeting them in the street to call upon her. Leia, come on. It was some good, he thought, of being a rich instead of a poor boy, that having lost thereby those whom he loved best, he had come where he could at least see Miss Galbraith, but Mrs. Sclater had pretended not to understand where he wanted to go, and used other artifices besides, well meant of course, right, to keep him from his good friends, to keep him to herself until she should better understand him. After that, he had seen Ginevra more than once at church, but had had no chance of speaking to her, for in the sudden dispersion of its agglomerate particles, a Scotch congregation is, or was in Gibbie's time, very like the well-known vitreous drop called a Prince Rupert's tear, in which the mutually repellent particles are held together by a strongly contracted homogeneous layer, to separate with explosion the instant the tough skin is broken and vibration introduced. And as Mrs. Sclater generally sat in her dignity to the last, and Gibbie sat with her, only once was he out in time to catch a glimpse of the ultimate rank of the retreating girls. He was just starting to pursue them when Mrs. Sclater, perceiving his intention, detained him by requesting the support of his arm, a way she had, pretending to be weary or to have given her ankle a twist when she wanted to keep him by her side. Wow. Manipulation is called witchcraft in the Bible, they say. Control and manipulation, anyway. That's what I've learned recently. It makes sense, right? Anyway. Leia, what are you eating? Don't eat stuff on the ground. Come on. Oh, I guess I could give her water. We hardly walked a lot to get here, though. What are you eating, Leia? Hold on. No one's coming for a second. I'll just focus in on the ocean. Come, Lily. I brought your water. I brought it. Okay. Hold on. There you go. All right, how cute is this? Okay, what is that? All right, let's see where we are. Oh, cute, there's these little kids with a puppy. All right, that's awesome, because I don't reveal anyone in my videos. Good girl, just sit. Okay, so okay, so here, let's see. Another time he had followed them close enough to see which turn they took out of Dower Street, but that was all he had learned. And when the severity of the winter arrived and the snow lay deep, sometimes for weeks together, the chances of meeting them were few. The first time the boys went out together, that when they failed to find Mistress Kroll's garret, they made an excursion in search of the girls' school, but had been equally unsuccessful in that. and although they never after went for a walk without contriving to pass through some part of the region in which they thought it must lie, they could never yet even discover a house upon which they could agree as presenting probabilities. So they didn't know how to find them. Mistress Kroll probably would have known. There's a baby. He's waving. All right, I was just telling the mom. That was so cute. The baby started waving. I mean, he's like maybe 1, no less than 1. I forget how old they are when they can wave and stuff. Anyway, Mr. Galbraith did not take Miss Kimball into his confidence with respect to his reasons for so hurriedly placing his daughter under her care. He was far too reticent, too proud, and too much hurt for that. Hence, when Mrs. Sclater's invitation arrived, the schoolmistress was aware of no reason why Miss Galbraith should not be one of the girls to go with her, especially as there was her cousin, Sir Gilbert, whom she herself would like to meet again, in the hope of removing the bad impression which, in discharge of her duty, she feared she must have made upon him. She chased him off with like an umbrella before. She didn't know the look of him and thought he was a sir, because he just inherited. Well, he was already a sir before in the inheritance. He had no money before, though. One day, then, at luncheon, Mrs. Sclater told Gibbie that some ladies were coming to tea and they were going to have supper instead of dinner. He must put on his best clothes, she said. He did as she desired, was duly inspected, approved on the whole, and finished off by a few deft fingers at his necktie, and a gentle push or two from the loveliest of hands against his hair thatch, and was seated in the drawing-room with Mrs. Sclater when the ladies arrived. Ginevra and he shook hands, she with the sweetest of rose flushes, he with the radiance of delighted surprise. But a moment after, when Mrs. Sclater and her guests had seated themselves, Gibbie, their only gentleman, for Mr. Sclater had not yet made his appearance, had vanished from the room. Tea was not brought until some time after, when Mr. Sclater came home, and then Mrs. Sclater sent Jane to find Sir Gilbert. But she returned to say he was not in the house. The lady's heart sank, her countenance fell, and all was gloom. Her project had miscarried. He was gone, who could tell whither? Perhaps to the baker's daughter, or to the horrid woman Kroll. See, she judges just by appearance. God doesn't judge by appearance. Anyway, this case was, however, very much otherwise. The moment Gibbie ended his greetings, he had darted off to tell Donald it was not his custom to enjoy alone anything shareable. Aw, that's why I'm sharing this book. Same reason. I don't want to enjoy this alone if I can share it with you all, and this view of the ocean. I wish you could see like the whole panorama. Like, it's spectacular. It's all ocean right here. There's a fancy hotel nearby. I never say where I am, but anyway. The news that Ginevra was at that moment seated at Mrs. Sclater's house, at that moment, as his eagerness had misunderstood Gibbie's expecting his arrival, Gibbie's expecting his arrival, raised such a commotion in Donald's atmosphere that for a time it was but a huddle of small whirlwinds. His heart was beating like the trample of a trotting horse. He never thought of inquiring whether Gibbie had been commissioned by Mrs. Sclater to invite him, or reflected that his studies were not half over for the night. An instant before the arrival of the blessed fact, he had been absorbed in a rather abstruse metaphysico-mathematical question. Now, not the metaphysics of the universe would have appeared to him worth a moment's meditation. He went pacing up and down the room, and seemed lost to everything. Gibbie shook him at length, and told him by 2 signs that he must put on his Sunday clothes. Then first shyness, like the shroud of northern myth that lies in wait in a man's path, leaped up, and he wrapped itself around him. It was very well to receive ladies in a meadow, quite another thing to walk into their company in a grand room, such as before entering Mrs. Sclater's he had never beheld even in fairyland or the Arabian Nights, wow. So her house was so fancy that he'd never even imagined it, even in those stories. He knew the ways of the one and not the ways of the other. Chairs ornate were doubtless poor things to dazed banks. Yet, daisied banks. Like we have daisies. I think Leia was just eating a little daisy here. Look, there's a little flower. Sorry, Leia. I don't know if it'll zoom in on that. So he was a cowherd before, and he would read when he had time while the cows were grazing, but he had to make sure that they were, okay and everything. And so when Gibbie came along, he helped him, and then he read a lot more. And then when Gibbie inherited this money from a distant relative that had passed on, he made sure Donald could go to school with some of the money. Anyway. So, chairs ornate were doubtless poor things to daisied banks. Yet the other day he had hardly brought himself to sit on one of Mrs. Sclater's. It was a moment of awful seeming. But what would he not face to see once more the lovely lady girl? He bethought himself that he was no longer a cowherd but a student, and that such feelings were unworthy of one who would walk level with his fellows. He rushed to the labors of his toilet. That's what they call when you put on clothes back then, and dress. Performed severe ablutions, endued his best shirt, coarse but sweet from the fresh breezes of Glashgar, a pair of trousers of buff-colored fustian, stamped over with a black pattern, an olive-green waistcoat, and a blue tailcoat with lappets behind, and a pair of well-polished shoes, the soles of which, in honor of Sunday, were studded with small, instead of large knobs of iron, set a tall beaver hat, which no brushing would make smooth, on the back of his head, stuffed a silk handkerchief, crimson and yellow, in his pocket, and declared himself ready. All right, this is how a Scotchman gets ready back then, in his nice clothes. Now Gibbie, although he would not have looked so well in his woolly coat in Mrs. Sclater's drawing room as on the rocks of Glashgar, would have looked better in almost any other than the evening dress, now alas, nearly European. Mrs. Sclater, on the other hand, would have looked worse in any other because, being less commonplace, it would have been less like him. Mr. Sclater, on the other hand, would have looked worse in any other because, being less commonplace, it would have been less like himself because he's more commonplace. And Donald's a poet, so he dresses in the Scottish garb, right? And he can own it because it's just more like how he is, just unique. And anyway, and so long as the commonplace, conventional, go greatly outnumber the simple individual, it is perhaps well the present fashion should hold. But Donald could hardly have put on any clothes that would have made him look worse, either in respect of himself or of the surroundings of social life, than those he now wore. Oh, wow. Oh, just wait. Neither of the boys, however, had begun to think about dress in relation either to custom or to fitness, and it was with complete satisfaction that Gibbie carried off Donald to present the guest of his guardian, to the guest of his guardians. Donald's preparations had taken a long time, and before they reached the house, tea was over and gone. They had some music, and Mrs. Sclater was now talking kindly to two of the schoolgirls, who, seated erect on the sofa, were looking upon her elegance with awe and envy. Ginevra was looking at the pictures of an annual, so, some kind of yearly book or something. I forgot, like the almanac or something. Anyway, Mr. Sclater was making Miss Kimball agreeable to herself. He had a certain gift of talk, depending in a great measure on the assurance of being listened to, an assurance which is, alas, nowise the less hurtful to many a clergyman out of the pulpit, that he may be equally aware no one heeds him in it. Wow. No one heeds him in it. When he's not speaking, in a sermon. I don't know. So chapter XLVI, is that 45? Yeah, I think the last chapter was 44. But it's just weird to have all those numbers before. I don't know. This is, 46. 46, so that was maybe I don't know if I had another chapter in between. Oh, wait. Yeah, okay. The girls. Okay, this is the chapter called The Girls. Okay, so the door was open. Donald spent fully a minute rubbing his shoes on the mat as diligently as if he had just come out of the cattle yard, and then Gibbie led him in triumph up the stair to the drawing room. Donald entered in that loose-jointed way which comes of the brains being as yet all in the head, and stood resisting Gibbie's pull on his arm, his keen hazel eyes looking gently round upon the company until he caught sight of the face he sought. When, with the stride of a sower of corn, he walked across the room to Ginevra. Mrs. Sclater rose. Mr. Sclater threw himself back and stared, the latter astounded at the presumption of the youths, the former uneasy at the possible results of their ignorance. To the astonishment of the company, Ginevra rose, respect and modesty in every feature, as the youth, clownish rather than awkward, approached her and almost timidly held out her hand to him. He took it in his horny palm, shook it hither and thither sideways, like a leaf on a doubtful air, then held it like a precious thing. He was at once afraid of crushing by too tight a grasp, and of dropping from too loose a hold, until Ginevra took charge of it herself again. Gibbie danced around behind him, and all but standing on one leg, but for Mrs. Sclater's sake, restraining himself, because he would do that when he got really excited. He'd stand like, what are those, pelicans? Anyway, and wanting to be not a while, looked about him for a chair, and then, first espying Mrs. Sclater, went up to her with the same rolling, clamping stride, but without embarrassment, and said, holding out his hand, "How are you this night, ma'am? I saw your bonny face when I came in, and grand house like this of yours. I am sure, ma'am, I couldn't ever be grown to fit yourself, but it's just some perplexing to plain folks like me, who's been used to just a mere room, and less until now, or something, into it." You can see this Scottish. You can read it yourself, and I always say translate it in the comments if you'd like to, if it's not there already from someone else. Donald was thinking of the meadow on the Lorries bank. "I was sure of it," remarked Mrs. Sclater to herself. "One of nature's gentlemen. He would soon be taught." Okay, so she liked the compliment, but was like, "Oh no, you can't, introduce yourself to someone that you've not been introduced to," and all this stuff is about to happen, probably, right? She was right, but he was more than a gentleman, and could have taught her what she could have taught nobody in turn. Wow. The inner workings of a person. That's why I was hesitating earlier when I said we're all the same. My brother says sometimes people are as different inside as like an angel and an acorn. But we're still not to judge. We don't know. God could change someone from an acorn to their angel self in a second. Like I always get this glitter on my fingernails to remind us of our sparkling soul nature. But God develops our soul nature, by grace. The word grace in Greek is charis, which is like character. He develops your character, often over time. But I was meditating on how he healed the man that the men dropped down from the ceiling, and the man right before that of leprosy. I forget where it was, Luke 14 maybe. Let me get my mic closer again so the wind doesn't get it. Anyway, "You will soon get accustomed to our town ways, Mr. Grant, but many of the things we gather about us are far more trouble than use," she replied, in her sweetest tones and with a gentle pressure of the hand, which went a long way to set him at his ease. "I am glad to see you have friends here," she added. "Only one, ma'am, Gibbie and me." "Excuse me, Mr. Grant, but would you oblige me, of course? With me it is of no consequence, but just for habit's sake, would you oblige me by calling Gilbert by his own name, Sir Gilbert, please? I wish him to get used to it." Oh my gosh, right. "Your will be it, ma'am. Well, I was just saying, Sir Gilbert, that is, ma'am, and myself, we have known Miss Galbraith this long time. being that the lards and folk, as I may say, being of the lairds, the lord of the land, that's her father in that time, but he'd been gambling his money, speculating, and lost a lot of it, but they don't know yet, really. So I guess I'll wait till it's the story. To most of the company, he must have looked very queer. Gibbie, indeed, was the only one who saw the real Donald. Miss Kimball and her pupils stared at the distorted reflection of him in the spoon bowl of their own elongated narrowness, right? They're taught to be narrow at this finishing school or whatever it's called. Mrs. Sclater saw the possible gentleman through the loophole of a compliment he had paid her, and Mr. Sclater behold only the minim, which the reverse telescope of his own enlarged importance. He, having himself some of sufficiently humble origin, made of him, while Ginevra looked upon him more as one who marvelled at the grandly unintelligible than one who understood the relations and proportions of what she beheld. Nor was it possible she could help feeling that he was a more harmonious object to the eye, both of body and mind, when dressed in his corduroys and blue bonnet, walking in the green fields, with cattle about him, his club under his arm and a book in his hand. Like, that looked more like his natural self, you know? And it would totally match the surroundings that he was in, where right now he sort of stands out, right? So seen, his natural dignity was evident. Now he looked undeniably odd. A poet needs a fine house rather than a fine dress to set him off. And Mrs. Sclater's drawing room was neither large nor beautiful enough to frame this one, especially with his Sunday clothes to get the better of. To the school ladies, mistress, and pupils, he was simply a clodhopper, and from their report became a treasure of poverty-stricken amusement to the school. Wow, and just people make fun of people that have so little money, like Donald had. Often did Ginevra's cheek burn with indignation at the small insolences of her fellow pupils. At first she attempted to make them understand something of what Donald really was, but finding them unworthy of the confidence, was driven to betake herself to such a silence as put a stop to their offensive remarks in her presence. So they stopped saying them in her presence, at least. "I thank ye, ma'am," said Donald as he took the chair. "You're very condescending." Then, turning to Ginevra and trying to cross one knee over the other, but failing from the tightness of certain garments, which, like Donald, was with Saul's not similarly faulty armor. Like David was. Yeah, when David was going to fight Goliath, he tried on Saul's faulty armor and it didn't fit, so he just went out as he was with the 5 stones. Because I heard there are 5 giants mentioned in the Bible right then, relatives of Goliath, that he was planning to take out all of them. That's what I heard recently. I loved it. He had not hitherto proved. "Well, ma'am," he said, "you haven't forgotten Horn, I hope." It's called something else, but it's the cow with the horns on it that he would have to run after, that would get in the grass and stuff. The other girls must be pardoned for twittering, offensive as the habit so common to their class, for the only being they knew by that name was one to whom the merest reference sets pit and gallery in a roar. Miss Kimball was shocked, disgusted, she said afterwards, until she learned that the clown was there uninvited, cherished a grudge against Mrs. Sclater, and so she didn't know that boy was wasn't invited by Mrs. Sclater. Otherwise, she was offended that Mrs. Sclater would have such a person, a low person, meet her students. You know, "I never read the balance about the worm lingering round the tree," said Donald, making rather a long link in the chain of associations. "Once thought upon that day, ma'am, when you first came down the brae, the water with my sister Nicey, and I came over the burn to tell you to guard my lunch about waiting on my feet." Okay, here, you can read it too. Here, What's all this? Ma'am, will you afford me there? I see the blow lift again, and just lowing, flaming green. And now at their busiest, the wind asleep, and the burn saying, you need none of your spark. I'm here, and it's my business. None of your speak. Oh, he's saying, okay, so the river. He's saying what the river is saying. I wish I could read this properly, like I was a narrator or something instead of a psychologist and mom. Oh, what a cute picture. Anyway, he's just saying that the river would be saying right about now, you need not speak. I'm here, and it's my business. Ma'am, then I think upon it, as it seems to me in the human heart close, in the midst of some coffer of cunning workmanship, must be a terrible, precious-like thing. Gibbie behind Donald's chair seemed pulsing light at every pore, but the rest of the company, understanding his words perfectly, yet not comprehending a single sentence he uttered, began to wonder whether he was out of his mind, and were perplexed to see Ginevra listening to him with such respect. They saw a human offense where she knew a poet. A word is a word, but its interpretations are many, and the understanding of a man's words depends both on the hearer, what the hearer is, and on what is his idea of the speaker. All right. As to the pure, all things are pure. That's in the Bible. Because only purity can enter, so to the vulgar, all things are vulgar, because only the vulgar can enter. Wherein then is the commonplace man to be blamed? For as he is, so must he think. In this, that he consents to be commonplace, willing to live after his own idea of himself and not after God's idea of him, the real idea, which every now and then, stirring in him, makes him uneasy with silent rebuke. Right? We get called to our higher nature, and we see someone in a glimpse, like a rainbow that we didn't notice. There's a bluebird right over there. I don't know if you can see it. It's bright blue. It's like blue indigo. Anyway. Blue skies shining at me. Nothing but blue skies do I see. All right. Wherein then is the commonplace man to be blamed? For as he is, so must he think. In this, that he consents to be commonplace, willing to live after his own idea of himself and not after God's idea of him. So he's not yielding to God's idea of him, but staying commonplace. This real idea, which every now and then stirring in him, makes him uneasy with silent rebuke. Ginevra said little in reply. She had not much to say. In her world, the streams were still, not vocal. But Donald meant to hold a little communication with her, which none of them, except indeed Gibbie, he did not mind Gibbie, should understand. Okay, so here's the next conversation here. We'll see. I didn't know this was coming upon us, so I'll do my best. I had such a queer dream the other night, mem, he said, and I'll just tell you it. I thought I was down an awful kin of a wheat bog, a wet bog, when it's all like a marsh, if you don't know what a bog is, with dry, gravelly like hills about it, and nothing upon them but what a short hunger like girse. I don't know what a girse is. And out in the midst of the bog there grew just a tree, a saw, I think it was, but one couldn't. Uncle Old, I can't tell, I guess, I don't know what he's saying, must pass with age, and round the ruche scarlet trunk of it was twisted 3 folds of the ugliest, ill-featured creature, a serpent, as ever was seen, and it was just lathily to look upon. I could describe it to you, ma'am, but it would only make you runkle your bonny brow and look as I wouldn't have you look, ma'am, 'cause you wouldn't look freely so bonny as you div now when you just yourself. But as queer as the thing was, atween it and the tree, it gripped a book, and I know it for a book of ballads. So this is his dream. The snake was wrapped around this tree in the middle of a bog with a book of ballads, like a poetry book, right? And I got nearer, looking and looking, and some fright. But I wouldn't stand for that would be to catifile, and no true man. So he got nearer and nearer, right? He wanted to be courageous. Till I had gotten to within a yard of the tree, and at once, oh shoot. Okay, hold on, Leah. I'll let you, here, you got your space. Go ahead. Do you want your water? No? Here, do you want to sit with me? She looks a little hot. And I got nearer, looking and looking, and okay, so anyway, he got nearer, till I had gotten within a yard of the tree, and then at once, with a swing and a swirl, I was threefold about the tree, and the lathily worm was me myself, and I was the lathily worm. The very heart dropped from me for a horrible dread, as schooner as myself. It just says schooner. Say there I was, but I wasn't long there in my misery before I saw out of my own serpent eyes, I guess, must be with greeting over the top of the brae afore me, between me and the lift, as given right up to the very stairs. It wasn't day but night by this time about me, as well it might be. I saw the bonny sight come up of a knight in armour, helmet and shield, iron sheen, as but somehow I knew but the gang of the stand of him, the sway of the bonny body of the knight, that it was no man but a woman. You see, mem, since I came from Doorside, I had been able to get a grip of books. So since he's been there learning, here's more of the book. I'll move my hands out of the way in case you want to screenshot, and because it's a free copyright, this book is. So, wow. So he said since he's been there, he's gotten his hands on a bunch of books he's been reading. As I could read up to there, and I had been reading Spenser's Fairy Queen the night before, and yawn about the lady at part of the armour of a man, and fought like a good one for the right. So about, and the night before the night before this, right? I already said that. There's about the lady that's put on the armour of a man. Okay, so it's one of C.S. Lewis's books that he recommends, I think, Spenser's Fairy Queen, because he used to teach literature at Oxford and Cambridge, right? And so I know I have it, but I don't think I've gotten through it because the one I had was so old English. It's like this, you can hardly read it. Anyway, so he had been reading Spenser's Fairy Queen the night before, and they're about a lady that had put on the armour of a man and fought like a good one for the right of truth, and had put it to my head maybe, only when I saw her, I knew her as name was Britomart. She had a twisted branch and blue berries about her helmet, and they called her Juniper. Wasn't that queer? No. And she came down the hill. Wee bonny, big strides, no over big for a stately woman, but all the same different from nipperty, menacing, stippity stap of the ladies you see upon the streets here. And say she can come down as soon as she could come down the brae, I don't know if that's the marsh or the hill, whatever, as I sought to cry out, first to tell her that she didn't look till her feet, and would she be in the bog soon, and beg of her for mercy's sake to draw her sword and cut the ugly head off of me and let me down. Let me d. I don't know what that is. No, I must confess, at the ballant of Owen was running, I the worm hide of me, and I couldn't help thinking, not notwithstanding the change of hands in the story, lay still the part of the knight. But how was only a man, not to say a mere ugsome serpent, to meant as such a thing till a lady, whether she was in steel boots and spurs and the long train of silver slippers, or in the long train of silver slippers. Okay, so there's a fairy story about the silver-slippered princesses and stuff. Anyway, there's the next slide so you can read it. If anyone wants to translate this for me from the writing, go ahead. On hath I soon fainted at I couldn't spoken a word, given I had something over such a stood. For when I opened my mouth to cry to her, I could do nothing, but shot only a forked tongue, and a cry, Mum, it was dreadful. Say I had just to take my tongue again, and say nothing for fear of fledging away my bonny lady, the bonny lady, in the steel clothes. So he didn't want to say something else, and then her think that she was just a snake. Anyway, and she came down and down onto the bog, and for the weight of her armor, she sank a fit until into it, right, into the bog. And she came and she stood and looked at me, and I had seen her afore, and knowed her well. And she looked at me and looked, and I looked, and I wouldn't say what was in the poor woman's heart. But at the last she gave a great sigh and a sob, like a stewed just in given she was trying something, but could not make up her bonny mind, and yawn at what I was, right? Because he looked like a serpent. The ballant. Anywho, I gripped the book atween me and the tree, for there it was, and I saw it afore, and I see at last she goes akin, I know a cry, and turned a good away with her head hanging down and her sword trailing, and never turned to look about her, but up the brae and over the top of the hill and down a rye and on the branch with the berries was the last I saw of her, going down like the moon about the hill, like the mean ahint the hill. I don't know what the mean is, M-E-E-N, whatever. And just with the foul greeting, I came to myself, and my heart was going like a pump, and I would fain put out a fire. No, wasn't that a queer like dream? I'll say no more, ma'am, but I have current a kimbit of we to garret till better. Ginevra had from the first been absorbed in listening, and her brown eyes seemed to keep growing larger and larger as he went on. Even the girls listened and were silent, looking as if they saw a peacock's feather and a turkey's tail. When he ended, the tears rushed from Ginevra's eyes. For bare sympathy, she had no perception of personal intent in the parable. It was long before she saw into the name of the lady knight, for she had never been told the English of Ginevra. She was the simplest, sweetest of girls, and too young to suspect anything in the heart of a man. So Donald sort of like has this very deep crush for her, as you're seeing. But I can't remember what the name of the woman was. Britomart? I don't know how that connects to Ginevra. Anyway, but maybe you can rewind and see. Oh, Donald, she said, I'm very sorry for the poor worm, but it was naughty of you to dream such a dream. How's that, ma'am? Returned Donald, a little frightened. It was not fair of you, she replied, to dream a knight of a lady, and then dream her doing such an unknightly thing. I am sure if ladies went out in that way, they would do quite as well on the whole as a gentleman. So I don't know what she ended up doing because I couldn't understand what that, but if I remember to explain next time, I will. I can look it up because I have a book that translates it, and I can just, what is the word? Make a summary of it. I'm allowed to do that. I make no doubt of the ma'am having forbid, heaven forbid, cried Donald. But ye see, dreams are senseless things, and they won't be helped, and that's just how I dreamt it. Well, well, Donald, broke in the harsh, hold on, let's see, what's the next page? Pompous voice of Mr. Sclater, who, unknown to the poet, had been standing behind him almost the whole time. You have given the ladies quite enough of your romancing. That sort of thing, you know, my man, may do very well round the fire in the farm kitchen, but is not the sort of thing for a drawing room. Besides, the ladies don't understand your word of mouth. They don't understand such broad Scotch, like I don't much. Come with me, and I'll show you something you would like to see. He thought Donald was boring his guest, and at the same time preventing Gibbie from having the pleasure in their society for the sake of which they had been invited. So he wanted, I guess her dog just went. I could give her a bag, but I don't know if she wants one anyway. Come with me. Anyway, so he wanted the women to have, Sir Gibbie to have a chance to talk, Sir Gilbert to have a chance to talk to the women. Donald rose, replying, "Thank you, sir. I thought it was in old Scotland still, as well as upon Glashgar. I thought I was in old Scotland still." Like he thought this town was in old Scotland, so people would know Scottish. But maybe my geography books are some old-fashioned. Didn't you understand me, ma'am? He added, turning to Ginevra. "Every word, Donald," she answered. Donald followed his host contented. Gibbie took his place and began to teach Ginevra the finger alphabet. The other girls found him far more amusing than Donald. First of all, because he could not speak, which was much less objectionable than speaking like Donald, and funny too, though not so funny as Donald's clothes. And then he had such a romantic history, and was a baronet, right? Wow. In a few minutes, Ginevra knew the letters, and presently she and Gibbie were having a little continuous talk together, a thing they had never had before. It was so slow, however, as to be rather tiring. It was mainly about Donald. But Mrs. Sclater opened the piano and made a diversion. She played something brilliant, and then sang an Italian song in Strilacious style, revealing to Donald's clownish ignorance a thorough mastery of caterwauling. Wow, so she does know how to do it formally. Anyway, without mentioning that she had neither voice nor ear nor love of music, but said Miss Galbraith should sing. For once in a way, as a treat, that little Scotch song you sing now and then, my dear, she added. So Mrs. Kimball. Oh, then she asked Mrs. Kimball to play something, who declined. Oh, okay, sorry, I missed that line. Who declined, without mentioning that she had neither voice nor ear nor love of music, but said to Miss Galbraith to sing, right? That Scotch song you sing now and then, my dear, she added. Ginevra rose timidly, but without hesitation, and going to the piano, sang to a simple old Scotch air, to which they had been written the following verses. Before she ended, the minister, the late herd boy, and the dumb baronet were grouped crescent-wise behind the music stool. And so here's the words. Let's see if I can say it. It goes here and then over here. It's old Scottish, so I don't know what's come over me. There's how a war since was a hollow. I never looked oft before me, and cry when a gar me cert. There's nothing no more to come over me. Blow the wind free. Only art, but he puts the word quarter here, okay. For yon kirkyard is a churchyard. For yon kirkyard there's a hillock, a heart where hence was a how. And joy there's no left a mealock, a crumb. Dead as were once was a low, ashes and flame, he says in parentheses. For in your kirkyard, in the hillock, lies a seed that wouldn't grow, or wants to grow, I don't know, wanna grow. It's my heart at hands up to the wee hilly, that's how there's a how in my breast, It's how a down where with my Willie, God would have him, he was released. Anyway, and down the green grown hilly, but eyes be after it nest. Come away nights and mornings, come ooks, years of time's clan. You're welcome a yacht without a scorning. Take me to him as fast as you can. Come away nights and mornings, you are wings of mighty span. For I know he's looking and awaiting, looking I down as I climb. Would I have seen him with such greeting, instead I going to him. I'll step out like one sure of meeting. I'll travel and run to him. Wow. I wish I could read it better. If someone wants to translate that or knows this song and puts it down there for us. I'm sure it's a very old Scottish one. Anyway, 3 of them knew that the verses were Donald's. Oh, it was just Donald's, so it's old because it's from George MacDonald's book. Wow, and she put music to it, I guess. If the poet went home feeling more like a fellow in the blue coat and fustian trousers, or as a winged genius of the tomb, I leave my reader to judge. Anyhow, he felt he had enough for one evening, and was able to encounter his work again. Perhaps also, when supper was announced, he reflected that his reception had hardly been such as to justify him in partaking of their food, and that his mother's hospitality to Mr. Sclater had not been in expectation of return. So, their mother had fed Mr. Sclater up on the mountain when he was trying to get Gibbie, but he didn't return it. As they went down the stair, he came last and alone behind the 2 whispering schoolgirls, and when they passed on into the dining room, he spelt out of the house and ran home to the furniture shop and his books. When the ladies took their leave, Gibbie walked with them, and now at last he learned where to find Ginevra. Yay! Just in time for us. All right, we have to end here because I only read for an hour. The next chapter is a lesson of wisdom. That was so lovely. Wow, I wish I could take it off of cinematic now and show you the ocean. Thanks so much for being here. Share this to like-minded. Much love to you, always.